Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stories with yours truly. I'm so happy you chose to stop by and take a listen to 10 brand new stories. They're just waiting for you to experience them. Now, you might be noticing something right now. That's right, that's my pet dachshund Ruby in the background. For those of you who stay around at the end of the videos, you're already familiar with her. For those new around here, she's here to welcome you into today's episode. So yeah, today's stories consists of an experience working at a convenience store out in the middle of nowhere, an encounter with an intruder while home alone, a story from Alaska, and finally, even an experience from Halloween. Remember friends, stick around until the end for some bonus content, but for now, let's get started. Story number 1. My job at the convenience store in the middle of nowhere. This was during the winter of 2010, and I was 18 years old when this took place. I was working at a 24/7-hour convenience store that was pretty much in the middle of nowhere. It was located about an hour outside of Gilroy, California, right next to the 5 freeway. Now, normally we get pretty busy during the summer months as people are traveling, but during the winter, it's the complete opposite. The days seemed to go on forever as customers slowly started disappearing well into the month of December. It was a bummer, however, because for the most part, the job was pretty boring. Come to think of it, the only reason I was working there was because my uncle's friend owned the shop. He was actually the one that had told me about it, and I thought it would be a great way to earn some extra money on the side. Anywho, it all started when I left my house in Gilroy, and I began to drive towards the shop. I was looking at working 8 hours, from 10 p.m. all the way until 6 a.m. the next morning. Now that I really think about it, I guess it wasn't that bad. I mean, after all, it gave me the perfect opportunity to catch up on studying and also read for school. So I leave my house and I head on over to the nearby Starbucks to get a coffee. From there, I step inside and I wait in line. But I did begin to notice this man who I'd say was in his mid-40s. He just began looking over at me. He sat by the entrance reading the newspaper and drinking his latte. I didn't mind him too much as I paid for my coffee and then exited the shop about 10 minutes later. Okay, well, maybe he was just admiring the t-shirt I was wearing. No big deal. I don't really pay attention to him anymore until I hear somebody calling out to me. Well, I turn around and guess who it is. Hey there, excuse me. I'm really sorry to bother you, but would you like to hang out sometime? Maybe I can get your number and we can talk. I wasn't interested, so I told him I was late for work, and I soon left it at that. From there, he gets in his gray 2004 Chevy and he drives off. I now go ahead and get on the freeway and I start making the hour commute. I was honestly just trying to put the encounter behind me. About 45 minutes or so go by and I reach a stretch of road where I would have to make a turn. Once I turned, it's less than 10 minutes to work. Well, as I began driving here, I happened to notice a familiar-looking vehicle in my rearview mirror. It was only when it drove right next to me that I was in for a surprise. Remember the guy from Starbucks I'd seen less than an hour ago? Yep, you guessed it. There he was driving right next to me. I started to become weirded out because how is it that he knew I was driving here? Well, one thing was for sure. He was following me all along, and I hadn't been paying attention. To make matters even worse, he is signaling for me to put the window down, almost as if he wanted to say something. Of course, me being the naive one, I do so, and then he shouts back, "Hey, sorry about earlier. I don't think I said it right. I was wondering, did you change your mind, and did you still want to hang out sometime?" Yeah, like 45 minutes was really going to change my mind. Come on, I'm not going to give my number to a complete stranger. It's not going to happen. Anyways, I make up a lie and I tell him my phone was disconnected, and that seems to get him to lose interest. He then takes off and drives off into the distance. I'll admit, I was actually kind of worried that he might have followed me to work, but I soon forget about it because I no longer see him. Once I arrived at work, I meet up with my coworker Albert, who was just finishing up for the afternoon. I did mention what happened earlier, but we both just laugh it off and soon we forget about it. So it's about 6 p.m. now and Albert had just left, and from what he told me, there was only about 10 customers today. Pretty much it was basically the same thing. They fill up their cars or they use the restroom. Those were our favorite customers. They arrive, they leave, pretty easy stuff. Well, the evening goes by pretty much the same way. I do get a couple of customers I was familiar with, and one by one everything goes pretty smoothly. Like I mentioned earlier, this was during the winter time, so not only was it cold outside, but it got really dark. Remember, this place was as remote as it got, and with there only being a poorly dimmed lamp outside and the lights in the store, you could barely see the faint outline of people. Anyways, fast forward to around 5 a.m. My next coworker Adam would be arriving in about 30 minutes, and I was just beginning to finish my work. As I finished cleaning some shelves, I happened to look out the window. That's where I could see a car pulling up. I only noticed it for a second because I was so focused on stocking the shelf. Well, as I turned over again, I do notice a figure of somebody standing at the corner of the building. I initially brushed it off, thinking that maybe somebody had just stopped to take a break. So I returned back to the cash register and I looked at my phone for a bit. Well, when I looked up about 5 minutes later, I turned to the same spot by the window. Only this time, not only was the same person standing there, but they appeared to be looking right at me. This was when I began getting butterflies in my stomach, and I started thinking that maybe he had something else planned. To make the situation even worse, Adam messaged me saying that he might be running a little bit late. He normally works at 6 a.m., but he usually gets here at around 5:20 or so to keep me company for the last bit. Since he slept through his alarm, he told me that he might not get there until around 5:45 a.m. It was only 5:20. After about 10 more minutes, he ends up leaving and I think the situation is finally over. I then decided as a last-minute job, I would go ahead and mop the floor in the back and get my mind off of it. This was when I heard the familiar bing noise of the door opening. Thinking it was Adam, I go over and say hello, only to be face to face with a stranger from yesterday. This was when I started panicking, because he then said, "How come you didn't say hello to me when I looked at you through the window? I thought we were friends." He then goes on to say things like we would be perfect for one another, and how his previous partner had left him. Pretty much he was rambling at this point. With the mop in hand, I slowly started heading to the back room, when this time around, I heard a familiar voice calling out to me. It was Adam, and he was finally here. Quickly, I run over to him, and that's when this guy just gets up and leaves. It's like he didn't even make an effort to hide what he had been doing. "Hey, is everything okay with you? It really didn't look like that guy was a friend of yours." "Yeah, no kidding, Adam. Of course he wasn't my friend." All joking apart, I tell him about how I had seen him the night before and even told him about the car he was driving. He tells me something that surprised me. "Wow, that's funny, because as soon as I left yesterday, I noticed that same car parked literally right next to yours. It was bumper to bumper, and I could see that somebody was just in there staring at the store. Now, I was going to say something, but I figured that maybe he was somebody you knew. I guess now I should have said something. Sorry about that." Let's just say I ended up quitting and I never did see him again after that. Story number 2. The Man with the Bandana. This happened about a year ago. For some background context, my wife and I lived in a small townhouse right outside of Chicago, Illinois. It was in a suburb that is pretty quiet, and for the most part, it sees very little activity. Now, there were a couple of nights where you would hear sirens and stories of people's houses getting broken into, but most of the time this happened on the other side of town. Our neighborhood, on the other hand, was a little more on the higher priced end, and thus we really didn't have any issues. That was until one evening I would soon never forget. One night I had gotten home from work at around 6 p.m., and I had decided to go and take a shower. My wife was still at work at Smart and Final, and she wouldn't be home until around 10 p.m. Anyways, once done, I go ahead and head over to the couch in the living room to watch some TV. I was really into Lost at the time, and I'd spent the previous couple of weeks watching as many episodes as I could. Fast forward to around 9 p.m., I was getting hungry, so I decided to head over to the kitchen to make one of those frozen pizzas you make in the oven. It was nice because my wife always brought them for me to eat whenever there was nothing at home. So I stood there getting the oven ready when I happened to look out the kitchen window. This was when I noticed car headlights parked at the very end of the driveway. Funny, I thought. I looked over at my phone and I saw that it was only 9:15. My wife normally didn't get home until an hour later. Regardless, I don't mind it at first, as I think perhaps she got out earlier than expected. A couple of minutes after that, I could hear my dog barking. I should have mentioned it earlier, but I have an 8-year-old German Shepherd named Max. Like I said, Max is barking like crazy, and I began wondering why my wife hadn't entered the house yet. I mean, if she didn't have a key, she could have just called out to me. Either way, I head over to the living room window and I look through the curtains to see what the issue was. What I see surprises me. With the lights of the front porch, I don't see my wife standing at the door waiting for me to open it. No. Instead, I can see somebody with a bandana over their face, wearing a gray sweater and dark blue jeans. In his hand, he appeared to have a crowbar. Weird choice, but hey, I guess that's what he had on him. I closed the curtain only to begin hearing somebody kicking heavily at the door. This is followed by shouting and yelling outside. Instantly, I grab my dog and we start making our way over to the back room. This is where I could get one of my golf clubs. Let's see. A crowbar versus a golf club. I wonder who would win. Well, I had Max there with me, so surely we could form a tag team. Suddenly, Max and I hear two very loud pop sounds, followed by a car screeching away as it drove off into the distance. At this point, instead of going to the back room, we went through the backyard and went over to the neighbor's house instead. Once there, we could see that all the activity by the house had settled down and we began to relax. That silence was soon broken when we started hearing sirens from the officers' cars. In summary, I did call for help and the whole situation was looked into. My poor door, however, it had two small holes right next to the handle. That was probably what really got to me, and I started thinking about the loud pop sounds I heard. Anyways, about a week later, they had found someone who had broken into another house a couple of streets away from us. Thankfully, the owners weren't home at the time, but a neighbor did see it and called in about it. They ended up matching the same description as the person that tried to get into my house, and they were taken away shortly after. A couple of weeks later, we ended up finding a different place to live about an hour away, and we haven't had any issues ever since. Story number 3. The late night calls. Telephones. They're such a great invention, aren't they? They allow us to communicate with friends and family and others who we need to talk to. This way, if you live on one side of the country, you can talk to a relative that might live thousands of miles away from you. A great convenience if you needed to use it for that purpose, but to use it for other reasons? Yeah, let me just say that I wasn't expecting this to happen when it did. This was back in the late 1990s, when I was still in high school. It was just my dad and I at the time, and we lived in a small townhouse right outside of Jacksonville, Oregon. Our house was a one-story home located at the end of a small neighborhood. It featured 2 bedrooms, a bath, living room, basement, and a kitchen. Alongside this, we had a small front yard and a backyard that was fenced in. Anyways, my dad was always out of town since he worked for a private security firm. He actually would get hired by various different private companies to work for them. This meant that I would rarely see my dad, unless of course he wasn't working. This was usually every other weekend. As you might imagine, I was pretty much home alone most of the time. I really didn't mind it too much since I was 17 and I pretty much did everything on my own at that point. I never did feel too alone either because we owned a 3-year-old golden retriever named Luke. Now, if I ever did need anything, I could always go down the street and talk to our neighbors John and Nancy. They were an older couple in their late 60s who were retired, but they were always very friendly with me. I can still remember all the times that Miss Nancy would make me cookies and other sweets. Okay, you kind of get the idea here. Let me fast forward to one evening where something strange happened. I still remember it being a cold and rainy day as I stepped out with Luke to head over to John and Nancy's house. Remember, I still had to go to school, therefore I was taking Luke over to their house to have them look after him. They really enjoyed his company, so they didn't mind keeping an eye on him while I was at school. Anyways, the day goes by like normal, albeit a bit boring, but once I finish school, I head back home ready to enjoy my Friday afternoon. With Luke back home with me, we sat down enjoying movies and just relaxing. This relaxation turned out to be longer than expected, because before I knew it, it was around midnight. The thing is, I'd forgotten that I was supposed to meet up with a friend of mine at the mall the next morning, so I knew I needed to go to bed now, otherwise I would regret it in the morning. 3 a.m. arrives and suddenly I am awoken to Luke whining. This is usually a sign that he needed to go outside, so we go to the backyard and he takes care of his business. We step inside and that's when it happens. The phone started ringing. I'll admit, hearing the phone ring at 3 a.m. when you're home alone did make me a bit nervous, so you can understand my hesitation at first. I didn't answer, thinking it was a wrong number, and I soon went back to bed. About 5 minutes later, it rings again, and again, and yet again. I knew now something serious might be going on, so I head over to the kitchen to pick up the phone. Hello, who is this? It's 3 in the morning. Can this wait until tomorrow? Hello, good evening, miss. I'm sorry to bother you at a time like this, but I need you to open your door right now. I'm with the power company. It seems there's an issue with your power line. We need to get inside and do a couple of tests. Okay, hold the phone. Sorry, bad pun. I just wanted an excuse to say it. What kind of power company does work at 3 in the morning? On top of that, wouldn't I become aware of this so-called power issue? How was there even a power problem? Sorry, sir, but I think you might have the wrong house. My power's working just fine. That's when I started hearing a knock at the door. I knew now he wasn't joking. He was at my house, and he was outside waiting for me to open up. This was when I made the worst mistake by saying, My dad could take care of this in the morning if you want to come back, but he's not home right now. I can just give you his number if you would like. That's fine. Just go ahead and open the door and we can get this situation taken care of. I'm sorry, sir, but I don't feel comfortable doing that. I'm going to need you to leave, otherwise I'm going to call officers. This seems to have done the trick because he ends the call just like that. All went quiet, and the only thing I could hear was the light rain hitting the window. This was the point when I figured I would look out the window and see if perhaps he was telling the truth. Right when I opened the curtain, I'm face to face with a man in a mask and a phone in his hand. Quickly, I step back as I get on the phone and call the local police. In less than 5 minutes, officers arrived and they took my statement. When explaining the so-called power issue, they tell me that nobody called in about any sort of power problems anywhere near us. It's safe to say that the so-called technician was trying to get me to open the door. What remained a mystery, however, was how in the world he got in my house phone number. He wasn't anybody we knew, and surely he wasn't a friend or family member. Regardless, since it happened, my dad had security cameras installed, and it seemed that everything stopped soon after that. Not that it would really matter, because I eventually moved away about 6 months later for college, and I put the experience behind me. Story number 4. Being alone at night. This took place a couple of months ago at my parents' house. A little bit about myself. I'm 19 years old and I attend Cal State Long Beach in Long Beach, California, but I lived in Anaheim about 40 minutes away. If you're familiar with that name, you should be. Anaheim, California is where Disneyland is located. That's not really important to the story. I mention my home because I normally head over to my house on the weekends when I don't have any school. I do live on campus, but I head over on the weekends to spend time with my family. Also, it's a great way to take advantage of the fast internet my dad has. He has his own business and works from home, therefore he pays for the most expensive internet speeds. This was your average ordinary Friday afternoon, and I made the drive over to my parents' house, only to see that the house sat empty. Confused, I called my parents. Hi Mom, it's me. Hey, did you guys go out or something because nobody's answering the door? That's right, it's Friday, isn't it? Sorry, honey, but your dad and I are spending some time over at your grandparents' house. We should be back by Sunday morning. In the meantime, there's some leftover beef stew and mashed potatoes if you're hungry. Well, there goes the pizza I bought for us. I could save the beef stew and mashed potatoes for tomorrow, I guess. Either way, I'm getting into too many details. Fast forward hours later, and it's around 10 p.m. A bit late, but nothing was out of the ordinary. I'm in my dad's office working on my PowerPoint presentation, and I'm listening to some classical music. At some point, I started to get a bit tired, so I head over to the kitchen to make myself a cup of coffee. The kitchen was located at the very front of the house, and my dad's office was at the very back. In order to get to it, you would have to go down this dark hallway that eventually leads you to said kitchen. As I was returning back with coffee in hand, I heard a noise. The noise sounded like someone had dropped something, and that was then followed by what sounded like running. Of course, I do have neighbors, so it was possible that maybe one of them was outside. I ignored it and I returned back to the room. For another 20 minutes, I don't hear anything, so I figured what I had heard was in fact one of the neighbors. Even though I was rationalizing this in my head, part of me started to become uneasy. Suddenly, it's like I couldn't shake this feeling of somebody watching me, or better yet, being right outside my window. Because of these feelings, I do go ahead and head over to the window to take a look outside. I should note that the window in my dad's office has a perfect view of our backyard. As you might expect, at around this time it's pretty much dark out there, so at first I don't see anything. Right as I'm about to turn around, however, I happen to catch movement right alongside my dad's shed. This time around I focused in some more, until I was able to see this shed door opening, followed by someone stepping inside. Yeah, you can bet I wasted zero time reaching for the phone and calling in about it. Of course, by the time they arrived, he was no longer there. Can't really describe the feeling I got, but I guess in summary, it's the idea of being home alone where you feel most safe, only to have it ruined by someone else. Safe to say, I returned back to my dorm and only went to visit my parents when they were home. Also, no further incidents like that happened again. Story number 5. My trip to the convenience store turns into being followed. I'm currently living in a fairly small college town in Seattle. This taking place just a couple of weeks ago, the experience is still fresh in my mind. To start off, I just turned 19 years old, and I'm living with 2 other friends in my college dorms. It's a pretty basic lifestyle here. You go to school, you come back and study, then you go out on the weekends. Just your ordinary typical college life. For this story, we will call my friends Ashley and Kelly. Now this weekend was Ashley's birthday, and Kelly and I were looking at throwing her a surprise party at her dorm. I was in charge of preparing the food, and Kelly was in charge of keeping Ashley busy while I took care of things. Luckily, I wasn't alone since I had my sister come and help me prepare food, so it wasn't too bad. This taking place in November on a Friday and right before the week of Thanksgiving, our campus was pretty quiet. Well, while preparing the cake, I'd realized I'd purchased the wrong frosting, and therefore I had to make a quick run over to the convenience store. It was located on the opposite side of campus. This was, of course, when, of all times, Kelly called me. Hey, just letting you know, we're on the way back to the dorm. We should be back there in about 20 minutes. Wait, Kelly, hold on. Look, whatever you do, don't come back to the dorm just yet. The cake isn't ready. I need you to buy some time. Wait, hold on a minute, Ashley. I'll be right back. I'm gonna go use the restroom. Okay, good. She can't hear me. So, wait, are you serious? Didn't you message me about an hour ago saying we could come back? Yeah, but that's before I realized I got the wrong frosting. Sorry. Look, just give me like 40 minutes at most. I need to make a run over to the convenience store. With that, I'm making a mad dash over to the other side of campus with a purpose. I want to get this cake done. It was really all I had left to complete the cake, so I knew it wouldn't take too long. I get there, and because it was a Friday evening, it was pretty busy. Luckily, I knew which aisle to go to, so I quickly head over to get the frosting. Here's where it started happening. As I started making my way down the aisle, I went by this man who I want to say was in his 50s. He appeared to be shopping on his own, and he had some chips and a soda in his shopping cart. I give him a friendly smile and pass by him, and soon I forget about him. From there, I head over to the front of the store and I go pay for the frosting. Once I've paid for it, I start making my way over to the entrance, and there's that guy from a couple of minutes ago, and he's standing by the door. I'm really sorry, let me go ahead and get the door for you. Normally I wouldn't have minded and I would have thanked him, but something about him already had me on high alert. Perhaps it's the way he said it, or perhaps the way he looked at me. Regardless, my mission was to get back to the dorm. That wasn't before he grabs my arm and says, "Next time, you should be a lot more polite to those around you. Wouldn't want to get in trouble now, would we?" He lets go of my arm and I start running, thinking the whole thing was just so weird. That wasn't even the beginning. I'm now on campus a bit relaxed, so I start slowing my pace down and walking at normal speed. Guess who I see standing right next to one of the poorly lit campus lights? Yep, you guessed it. Stranger friend from the convenience store. With him in front of me, I try to step to the side, but he ends up following every step I took. Mind you, he wasn't saying anything now, and I had a bad feeling that being out here alone was going to end bad. This was when all my senses were telling me to run, and with that, I start heading over to the nearby library. All I can hear behind me is heavy breathing and him shouting towards me. I make it to the library just fine, and immediately I walked over to the security guard working that night. He was obviously pretty confused since I was out of breath and talking so fast, but regardless, I was able to get my message across. He went after the guy and I waited in the library for him to come back. Sadly, he didn't find them, but he did offer to walk me back to the dorm. In the end, we did complete the cake, albeit a bit later than expected. My friends were just happy nothing too serious happened to me, and we soon enjoyed the festivities. As an update, neither myself nor anybody have seen them, so who knows. Story number 6. The Mysterious Visitor. As someone who has lived out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, I can safely say that I've had quite a good amount of things happen to me. I don't know about you, but why is it that of all the weird stuff that happens, it's to those of us who live in the middle of nowhere? I digress. The point of this recollection is to talk about one of the times I had a visitor. Now, I don't want to spoil it just yet, but let's just say I laugh about it now. As a side note, I'm in college and I'm 20, but this took place about 3 years ago when I was 17. At the time of this taking place, it was just my mother and myself and her pet cat Molly. Seeing as my mom was a single parent and I was the only child, Molly sort of acted like my other guardian. She always kept me company, and seriously, it's like she could sense trouble from a mile away. Here was just an example of one of those occurrences. It was a quiet evening in autumn, and I was at home after being sick for most of the week. Thankfully for me, my best friend Julia had helped me with my assignments I needed to take care of. She was the best. The even better part was that she would make the 30-minute drive over to my house not only to get my homework, but also to bring me food. I mean, who does that? I'll tell you who, my best friend. Moving on. One of these evenings on a Friday, Julia had just left and I was now home alone with Molly. I was actually feeling a lot better this evening, and I was looking forward to returning to school on Monday. My mother was still working at the grocery store about 20 minutes away, and I knew she wouldn't be home until around 8 p.m. As I sat there enjoying some soup my mom had left me, I started hearing sounds right outside my window. You see, the garage is located right next to my room, so I could hear any noises that might be coming from there. I'll admit, I did start to get nervous, and it didn't help that Molly was meowing to indicate something was wrong. Here's the thing you should know about me, though. I'm as brave as it gets. At least, that's what I like to tell myself. As carefully and as quietly as I could, I go room to room trying to find something. From the looks of it, I don't see any windows or doors open. Surely whoever was making the noise couldn't have been inside. This was when I go outside to have a look, and with a spotlight, I make my way over to the garage. By this point, Molly has joined me and has begun meowing yet again. Here's something I noticed right off the bat. The door to the garage was slightly opened. Carefully, I opened the door and I began walking inside, checking to see if anybody was in here. This is a large garage, mind you, and it almost acts as its own separate house. So far, I'm not seeing anything, and that's when Molly lets out this loud yelling noise. I turn around, and with my light, I could see a large four-legged figure head over to me. It wasn't a person I was dealing with, but instead, it was a bear who happened to make its way inside the garage. In a matter of seconds, Molly and I make a run for it, quickly going back through the window, making sure it was locked. In summary, I called some local park rangers and officers, and they helped get the bear back into the woods. Like I mentioned, I laugh about it now, but until you're face to face with a bear, then it's no laughing matter. Story number 7. They were calling out to us. This occurred a couple of nights ago. I was walking with my 2-year-old dachshund on a trail that's next to my house. Right next to the trail is a set of woods. If you follow it long enough, then you reach a park where you can get into town. This was actually a route I took quite frequently to get to work, so I was fairly used to it. I don't know, but I've always been the sort of person who enjoys walking instead of driving. Therefore, this explained why my dachshund and I were on a nightly walk. Everything was going fairly well, up to the point of when we reached the wooded area. My dachshund started acting funny. She normally would start barking if she sees someone, but it didn't explain why she was barking at nothing. I mean, here we are. It was about 10 p.m. on this quiet, lonely, dark trail, and here she is making all this racket. I try to calm her down by letting her off her leash and let her run around for a bit, and this does seem to calm her down a little bit, until of course she goes running off into the woods. Great, way to go. Now I have to go running after her in an even more darker section of my walk. As I'm calling out to her, I started to hear voices walking closer to me, and that's when I started realizing what was happening. I quickly turn around to where I think I hear the voices, only to see a shadow running off into the distance. I'll admit, all the bravery I had a few seconds ago disappeared, and now I'm out here with a stranger, and with my dog missing, it didn't exactly help my situation. What happens next is another 5 minutes of nervously looking around until I could hear barking. There she was, barking at something that was once again running off into the distance. This time I make sure to grab her and we head back the way we had arrived. I wish that were the end though, but one last thing happened. As we exited this set of woods, I once again began to hear a voice, only this time I could more or less understand what was being said. "I hope you'll come out to play with me again sometime." This was then followed by what sounded like a laugh of a lunatic. Safe to say I don't look back until I made it home. This was the first time it happened to me, and even though I've talked to some of my neighbors about it, they have no clue what I'm talking about. Story number 8. Exploring an abandoned farmhouse. So this was about 2 years ago when I used to live out in Oklahoma with my parents. I was living with them on their farm, meanwhile I was attending college. I've since graduated and I moved away and I'm living with my girlfriend in California. But I wanted to tell you about this one weird encounter my cousin and I had. Since we pretty much lived out in the middle of nowhere, we rarely got the chance to interact with anyone. Honestly, the closest form of interactions we did have was just with family members. Therefore, little did we know what kind of adventure we would have one random Sunday afternoon. In this story, I'll go ahead and call my cousin Evelyn. Evelyn and I were pretty close. We were pretty much like siblings, and when we weren't busy working or going to school, we would spend time going on our ATVs. Just imagine it, endless miles of farmlands and back roads that seemed to go on for miles and miles. There would be times we would drive for hours until we would reach other homes and ranches. Anyways, on one of these adventures, we had decided to take a route we had never taken before. This took us on a series of back roads that went up to some woodlands. Out here, you wouldn't really expect to find anyone, and up until this happened, we were expecting just that. Yes, we were always told to be careful of the crazies that lived out here, but we always thought that was just a rumor. As we're driving, we reach this wooded area that turns into a large set of woods. The trail does appear to be abandoned, but the scenery was absolutely stunning. We go ahead and go down this dirt road for about a mile until we notice an opening up ahead of us. Once there, we're able to see an old run-down house and what appeared to also be a barn. Now, this was during a time when I was really into photography, so you can imagine I wasted no time taking pictures of this abandoned-looking home. Anyways, as we are exploring the house, we are able to notice this SUV that was parked just outside of our line of view. The only reason we had seen it was because it stood out from all the trees surrounding it. Weird, but perhaps it was abandoned just like this place. That's why we really didn't pay attention to it too much. Satisfied with the pictures, we get back on our ATVs and we start heading back down the dirt trail we had arrived from. At this point, it was sunset and I would give it about 30 minutes for it to get dark. As we are driving, we both became aware of the noise of another vehicle. This was when we looked behind us to reveal that same SUV from earlier. It's now making its way over to where we were heading. Obviously, it wasn't so abandoned, so we now go faster trying to get away. Unfortunately for us, it appears that whoever was in there wasn't happy with us because we can hear somebody yelling out to us telling us to stop. "What did you two kids do on my property? Get back here, now." That was more or less what was being said. Now, that wasn't what really got to us, though. It was the idea that he actually ended up bumping into me, almost causing me to lose control of the ATV. One thing was for sure, we had to lose him fast. In that same exact moment, we thought of something. We are on ATVs. These things are meant to go off-roading, so why don't we test that? This was when I yelled out to my cousin to follow me, and we get off the main back road and head off into the dirt. Yeah, just as we expected, Mystery Guy's SUV got stuck, and we laughed until we no longer saw him. Not exactly sure who he was, but we never did return. Story number 9. The Halloween Experience. October 31st, 2013. Halloween. Yes, it's that awesome time of the year. It's that one day where I can dress up as my favorite anime character and not have people look at me funny. Well, there is Anime Expo, but that's only in one location. I'm talking about being able to go trick-or-treating with friends and be all in costume. Yeah, I'm sort of that one person who's always looking to have fun moments, but this moment, or series of moments, wasn't exactly fun. Here's what I mean. After a pretty boring day of college courses, which consisted of geology, I left campus excited and looking forward to the evening. This evening, my best friend Amy was throwing a Halloween party. She had invited myself along with my other friends. Our plan was to go trick-or-treating at a local park, then head on over to her place for the festivities. As for my costume, I had chosen to dress up as Asuna from Sword Art Online, which at the time was fairly new. Obviously, it's evolved into this big franchise, but back then it wasn't too popular yet. Moving on, the evening goes by pretty fast, and after hours of games and music, it's approaching midnight. With a project due in a couple of days, I knew I had to get back to my dorm so that I could wake up early the next morning and work on it. So now begins the story of why I don't like walking late at night. Amy offered to take me back to the dorm, but I figured since it was only a 20-minute walk, it wouldn't be such a big deal. And besides, there are still many people walking about, so why should I have to worry? Against my better judgment, I now take out my iPod and I make the walk back. The problem started happening when I reached the park, the same one where the people were giving out candy and having a party for the community. By this point, the festivities were coming to a close, and the only people left were the ones who were picking up the mess left behind by all the kids. I walked by some people, and one of the dads who I'd seen earlier called out to me. He was with his kids, and he wanted to know if they could get a picture with me. I didn't see the problem, so we take some fun little pictures, and he thanks me with some extra candy. Of course, he wanted to know why I was walking on my own, but I just told him I lived right across the street, which was a lie. The idea that Amy offered to take me back, and now this kind dad who was wondering how I was getting home, should have told me that maybe I shouldn't be walking out on my own, but regardless, I continued on. Eventually, I'm crossing the street from the park, and I'm now going down a series of dark neighborhoods. Remember, I had my iPod out, and I was listening to some Halloween music to set the mood. While I was choosing my next song, I hadn't realized that somebody was walking towards me from the other side of the street. I only now noticed him when he was about 10 feet away. Well, what does he do? He bumps into me and grabs my iPod. He then begins running away from me, heading towards where the park was. I wasn't having this, so I start running after him, telling him to get back here. All the meanwhile, I'm trying to make a phone call. As I'm on the phone with a dispatcher, I'm explaining to them what is happening, and the lady on the other end says, "Stop following him. You don't know if he might have something on him. Get somewhere safe and wait for officers to get there." Lady, I'm sorry, but I had some really important pictures from like a year ago on there. They were pictures of my late best friend and I wasn't about to lose them. You can imagine how angry I was as he now started heading into the park. This was my chance. Either he had no idea people were there, or he was dumb. Up ahead of me, I can see the dad from earlier, so I end up calling out to him. "Hey, can you stop him? He took my iPod from me." Hero Dad jumps into action with another buddy of his, and they tackle him down like a football player. They then keep him there until officers arrive and they take him away. Apparently, this wasn't the first time he had been in trouble, so it's nice to know he won't be taking people's belongings anytime soon. Thankfully, I got my iPod back, and I've since backed up the pictures on my laptop. I will always be thankful for the dad who helped me out, and I'm actually still friends with his kids today. They look up to me like I'm an older sibling, which I have to admit is pretty adorable. Wow, those were quite the tales, weren't they? Thanks for listening, friends. I hope you enjoyed today's story time. Just like in the intro, you're now watching another fun little bonus video here at the end. Right now, we got my 4 little birds just walking around the couch, having a good time, enjoying being out for the day. But yeah, that marks the end of today's video presentation. Wow, I sound so professional when I say that. Anyways, tell me which of these stories was your favorite. Let me know down below. Personally, I really enjoyed story number 9. Hero Dad saving the day on Halloween. It doesn't get better than that. It just really goes to show you the wonderful people out there and they're ready to lend a hand for you. So, along with question time, I wanted to go ahead and start something else that's new. One thing I love doing is spreading positivity and kindness. So today I give you a little homework assignment. No, don't worry, you don't have to write an essay. Just I want you to go ahead and do something that I know others around you will appreciate. Let's spread some love by having you do a good deed. Whether it be complimenting somebody's shirt or helping somebody open the door when their hands are full, let's go ahead and show them the awesome community we are. Here's a fun example of doing something nice and surprising. This is a picture from 3 years ago featuring my sister and I. This was when my sister graduated from San Jose State University. Seeing as we're originally from Southern California, my family and I wanted to surprise my sister by saying we couldn't make it to her graduation. But of course, we surprised her. But yeah, with that, it's time for some questions. Today's question is this: do you have any pets? And if so, what kind? Let me know, and if you want to see more of my pets, then make sure you're following me on my Instagram. The name's on the bottom corner of the video if you're new. With that, everyone, I'll see you all next time. Take care, and have an amazing day.